Time for another edition of the Online Dinner Party. You've got some amazing guests, and they'll be sharing a lot of their wisdom, a lot of things that they've got going on, and all in that kind of way. I'm hoping that everybody is preparing, at least if they're here on the East Coast, for what could be some bad weather. I know that Charleston down in South Carolina has already been hit, and Florida as well, by this tropical storm that started off as a hurricane, I believe, in the coast and all along those lines. But I just stepped outside because I needed to get a bite to eat. Hadn't had lunch, much less dinner, even though the show is called the Online Dinner Party. And I can tell you it was very humid outside, and it was definitely kind of a journey to get out there to get the food, which was actually from one of our chicken establishments and all along those lines, and then to get back because it is definitely very humid, and they're saying rain could be coming any moment, and I think it's supposed to be some torrential downpours tomorrow as well, because they even said some flooding may be happening in Durham, Raleigh, and some of the other areas near where I'm at. And one of my guests is that because she's part of our poetry community and all along those lines. I've also been watching some of the Olympics. Just finished watching in one of the distance running races where one of the gentlemen kind of set the pace, but then he got run down by the champion. So the champion took the trophy and everything, and I think he was from one of the African nations, but the U.S. did get a silver medal. So they're saying that the U.S. is doing stronger in the distance running than they have been expected to do, and all along those lines. And I watched a couple of the sprints and even watched some sports that I don't usually watch, like water polo. And I think yesterday I had watched a handball match. That might have been a day or two ago, and all along those lines. So one of the things about the Olympics is you get to watch sports that you don't usually see on your usual TV diet, and all along those lines. So there are sports that are popular year round, like basketball and track and field, and I guess to some degree even volleyball. But then there are other sports that we barely hear about in the States, but now they are at the forefront of people's attention. I even watched somebody doing a climbing event on yesterday, or at least a little bit of it, even though I didn't see the finals and all in that space. So definitely there are some sports that you don't usually get to see in the limelight, and even some newer sports, because I believe that for the second time, breakdancing will be an Olympic sport. I don't think it's been approved as of yet for the 2028 Olympics, which will be held in Los Angeles. But who knows? Maybe they'll decide to have it depending on what kind of success they have this time around, and all along those lines, especially since this is or last year was the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and all in that space. As a matter of fact, I know the Hayti Heritage Center, where I work at, is going to be doing a week-long set of events. I think it starts with BAM this weekend and everything, that'll be honoring hip hop, and they'll even be having a salute to Outkast at that particular event on this Sunday, and all in that space. So definitely it should be interesting to see what goes on in that way. But I'm gonna see how the ladies are doing and how they are coming along in the weather where they're at. Like I said, I do know that Ashley Lumpkin, who a lot of people know more as Millie in the poetry community, is here in the same area where I am. But I'm gonna find out how things are going where Doris is. Maybe she's not having as bad a weather as we're having here, and all along those lines. Because I know, Doris, that you are a life coach and an entrepreneur and all in that space, but you're also a mom that decided that she wanted to get maybe out of that corporate mindset, and all along those lines. And one of the things I found interesting was that even in your ways that you're doing things, you're even tying astrology into things also. And I'm going like, that's an interesting thing to be doing, and all in that space. So I know you've got this thing called the Prompted Collective and everything. So if you want to share a little bit about what you're all about, and I'm sure that our audience would love to learn more about you, because that's kind of what the Online Dinner Party is all about. We get to learn about each other and what everybody is about.
Thank you very much. Well, my name is Doris Efford, and I am a life coach, as you said. I'm also a life strategist. So I help people create systems and cycles and things like that that work in their lives. And that's kind of where the astrology comes in. It's a little less astrology and more just about the moon, because you've got a visual cue as the moon changes its phases, perhaps for different things that you could be doing. And also remembering not to burn out by taking that last bit of the phase to rest and recover.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know one of the things that I found out about you was that you were in that corporate world. And I know sometimes people get burned out in that corporate world and all along those lines. So I was wondering, at what point did you decide you want to get out of that world and move more into the life coaching space?
Well, actually, excuse me, I was in the corporate world before I had children. And then when I had children, I realized that it wasn't something that I was able to balance. Now, there are some people who do really well with that, and that's fabulous, but I was not one of those people. And I was fortunate enough that my husband was able to provide for us so that I could stay home. So I became a stay-at-home mom for a long time until my son was in junior high school. And at that point, I was able to start going back to work, and I went back to the corporate world. It wasn't the same. Now, I loved creating the systems and everything that I had always been doing, but it wasn't the same. So that's when I started trying to figure out what I needed to do with my life. Although I have to say, I think the biggest catalyst was where we live. I live in a remote community in northern Alberta, and we're surrounded by the boreal forest. Now, if you know anything about the boreal forest, it goes through its own cycles, and every now and then it needs to burn. So when it was on fire all around us and our community was evacuated and 80,000 people were headed down the one highway that comes in and out of our community, that's when we started thinking about our lives a little differently, right? So that was a huge catalyst for me to start thinking about what was important to me, how I wanted to structure my life, and that started my journey to self-improvement, and when I decided I wanted to be a life coach.
Do you find that a lot of people, because that's what conversation I've had on this show and other shows, are going through the motions and are definitely not even in necessarily the fields that they are interested in and all along those lines, but they feel that they have to do something in order to make money and all in that kind of lines? Because I know I have a number of friends that are in the creative world, and sometimes they will have getting jobs in order to make the ends meet and all along those lines. So as a life coach, I just wanted your take, because I'm hearing a lot of conversations, particularly when we were in the pandemic, but now even that we're out of it, where a lot of people were doing remote work, because even one of my other jobs, I used to do remote work for that, and we're actually out of cycle right now because it's a testing company, and the kids have got to go to school again and get tested. But so we'll probably get back in cycle probably at the end of this year or the early part of next year. But a lot of people are glad to do remote work, but other people feel that they don't even know how much work is actually going on when the remote workers are working, because you could be literally doing dishes or doing something else when you're supposed to be doing your work and all along those lines. So I just wanted your take on some of these new dynamics that are going on.
Yeah, and every large event like that, it just happened that something like COVID was such a huge event for so many different people. But any kind of event like that can be a catalyst to change. And when you really start reevaluating your life, absolutely, I see it all the time. And in fact, for some people, it can be the birth of their child. I've heard of different fathers who realize that, my child is born, now I need to provide for that child. I can't go out party all the time and then come home and at 3 a.m. and then, dump everything on my spouse or whatever that case may be. And they decide that they want to be a bigger part of that life, or like a life season, something that happens, or even a health scare for people. Different things like that can be the catalyst for any kind of change, because it's exactly what you said. We all just go through the motions until something triggers us to do something different. And I have to say, I am loving that people are reevaluating their lives, but it is a difficult process.
Yeah. And you mentioned, and I know a lot of people do it as almost a fun thing and not something that they take all that seriously. I know that a lot of people will read their newspaper and see what it is saying about their sign, and there are some traits that are very much true, it seems, about the signs. Most people say that Cancers, which is my sign, can be overly sensitive, and yeah, I can have my sensitive moments and everything like that. They also say that we're supposed to be great cooks, and I can tell you that I am not a great cook. So that is probably one of those things that my brother, who's a Scorpio, got better than I did, and all along those lines. But what is your take when people are looking to the stars for help and everything? And should they be looking at the stars and the moon? Because I do hear people say that you need to have an understanding of both where your star sign is, but also maybe an understanding of what was going on in the sun when you were born as well. But I was just wondering your take on that, because a lot of people will just see the kind of generic kind of comments that are given in their daily horoscopes.
Yeah, and if it's working for you, I say I'll go for it, right? I'm not I'm not married to any specific idea or ideology. And I think that, for some people, they're going to relate more to their sun sign. And for some people, they're going to relate more to their moon sign because that's more the emotional side of things. And then for some people, it might be their rising sign that they might be more attached to. Astrology can get really intricate, and there are a lot of different avenues that people can take. So that's not something that I completely specialize in. I focus mostly with the moon and the moon phases. That can get a little deep sometime too, but just the basics is a great way to start. And then, of course, as you get into it, if it's something that interests you, you can always go deeper. But it's really a personal thing, and that's something that I always preach is individuality.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to bring in Millie, or as like I said, most people know her by her birth name, Ashley Lumpkin, and all along those lines. That she comes out of the world of spoken words and poetry, and all along those lines. So, but one of the things I know about you, Millie, I'm just going to go more by the stage names that I know more, and everything is that you are very much a spiritual person yourself as well, and everything. Because I even hear that sometimes in your poetry and all along those lines. So, I just wanted your take on how much that has played into your growth as a spoken word artist. Because for those that don't know, you've been doing it for a number of years. I want to say you went to the women's competition, and I want to say you even won or at least placed, if I remember correctly, and everything. And you have definitely done well with the team, with the Jambalaya Slam team, and all in that space. But I just wondered your take on how spirituality has played a role in your own creativity.
So first, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. And so spirituality plays a huge role in both my creative process and like the content that I write. I try to write every day. I start the morning, in my notebook writing, and that's become sort of a spiritual practice for me. And then everyone will joke around, once I get on stage, you're gonna hear a metaphor about Jesus or Lazarus or, some vacation Bible school story is gonna show up in the work. Just because I think that even though I try to tell very specific stories with my poems, you've got to have a way for the reader or the audience or whomever to connect with it. And I just find that we live in the South, Bible Belt, heavy Christian influence. And so it's easy to use those stories for people to like hook into and to understand what I'm talking about.
And one of the other things I've noticed both in your poems and other poems is a lot of the poets in our community and spoken word artists in general do seem to do a lot of message-oriented poems, because I hear a number of poems that have to do with everything from domestic violence to other issues that are more around the world. I've even heard that in some of your poems as well. So I just wondered, how important do you think it is for the creatives to use their art as a means of activism as well?
So I think that so many words. Okay. So my mind is going in like two different spaces and I'm trying to bring it together to a concise answer. And I think the most honest answer is that real change and real revolution requires everyone bring their entire self. So as a creative, it's my job to bring creativity to activism. If my gifting was in administrative work, then it would be my job to bring administration to activism. If my gifting were in, babysitting, then I need to watch the kids while everyone else is on the street. So whatever gifting, whatever talent you have, I think it's your responsibility to bring all of that to the table and push for change in whatever ways you think are necessary.
That makes a lot of sense. Before I bring in Missy, and that's the other guest I've got, and she actually comes out of the world of paranormal and all along those lines. At what point did you discover that you had your gift of poetry? And what time were you like because I don't know if I've ever asked you this, were you a creative at a early age, or is it something you discovered later after you got connected with Jambalaya, or is this something that you always knew that you were in terms of being a poet or a creative? Maybe even your parents were seeing you scribble when you were a youngster and everything.
So my poetry origin story is a little bit villainous, in that. So short story long. When I was a first grade student in Virginia, there was a poetry competition at that school, and the girl that won was a third grader who wrote a poem about apples, and she got to read her winning poem over the announcements. And as a 6-year old, I'm thinking this is like the height of coolness that you get to read your poem on the announcements. And so fast forward to the next year, I'm at a new school starting second grade, and they have a poetry competition in my class, and I was like, I know how to win this. So I wrote a poem about oranges, and it did in fact win the competition. And so from then on, I continued it because I continued writing because I continued to be told that I was good at writing. I often think that if I had lost that competition in my second grade year, that I would have found different hobby or a different craft to go to. But it was fortunate that I was successful there.
That makes a lot of sense. Doris, before I bring in Misty, what about yourself? Did you have any creative journeys yourself? Because there's something I'm going to ask all of you that I ask just about every guest and everything, which is something that we talk a lot about, which is this whole notion of the imposter syndrome. But I was just wondering your take on creativity and all along those lines.
I think that every single person on this planet is creative in some way or another. And basically it's finding what it is that you like to express yourself out as. It might be the spoken word, it might be different types of writing, it could be drawing, it could be dancing, it could be cooking. I mean, the options are endless.
Yep, I agree with you on that and everything. I'll bring in Misty, and Misty discovered her gift as well. So, Misty, we've been talking about this creativity, and I know that you've been involved for a number of years in this whole notion of studying the paranormal and even true crime. I know that even here we've had a couple of famous cases, including the Peterson case with Mike Peterson, where he was accused and convicted of killing his wife and everything, even though there were all kinds of theories, including the bat theory, as to whether he did it or did not do it. But I just wondered your take as to when you first got involved in studying true crime and wanted to be able to communicate and even be involved, because I know a number of police departments are now, some are more acceptable than others about using people with a certain gift, because we all have a gift, whether we want to admit it or not, in terms of being able to tap into our potentials.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Mark, and hello to Doris and to Ashley. Yeah, I'm really, thankful for my gift, and I'm really proud to say that now, because for so long I was not able to express my gifts, from the way that I was raised and brought up real strict religious, and they certainly didn't want to hear about people being able to talk to people that are deceived or even seeing and hearing things. So, I learned, as I say, I learned to shut up when I was little, so I wouldn't get in trouble, for lying or making up stuff like they would say. So anyway, when I finally accepted my gift, I, consider it a blessing. Some people consider it a curse, to have this and be, related to the spiritual world or whatever. But you know, so I'm on this journey now to find out everything I can about the paranormal. I don't consider myself that I know everything about the paranormal, and so on my podcast, I have like just different people, other psychic mediums, investigators, and what the point that I want to stress is that it kind of piggybacks to what Ashley was saying. Um, if we have gifts, then it is our responsibility to use them to help other people. And so, when I talk to other psychic mediums or whomever, I stress that how important it is to give back. There's lots of families out there. We have cold cases. I mean, law enforcement, they can't keep up with everything. And what better gift can you give back than giving someone peace and hopefully answers? And that's what I'm trying to do with my podcast and just in everyday life. Um, I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago, and like you were saying, some law enforcement agencies they do, accept the help of psychic mediums or the family will want to come in on cases. But I've been contacted and I'll start helping a local law enforcement agency here in New Orleans with looking at some cases.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Everything. One thing that I'm curious about, this is for everybody. I have oftentimes heard that a lot of times, and I'll start with Doris, but definitely want to hear from Missy and even you, Ashley, as well, that we don't tap enough into our creativity. I think that the figure I've heard is that we probably use only about 10% of our brain power and all along those lines. But it is a known fact that we don't use as much as we could. And even some of the superheroes kind of skills that we have, we don't tap into. I mean, we've all heard the story of the person that is able to lift up like a major truck or something when they are faced with a catastrophe and they are forced to do that and everything. But we could all probably do that on a regular basis if we tapped into those kind of abilities and everything. But I just wanted y'all's take on that, because I think a lot of times, well, like I said, I might have to figure it wrong, but I know it is a very minute portion of our talents and abilities that we have from our brain that we use, and all along those lines. But what's your take on that, Doris, and if Ashley and Misty want to jump in as well?
Well, in my opinion, I think that that's right. That people, I mean, some people are extremely creative, and it's wonderful. But it's creativity, it's intuition, it's trusting ourselves. It's, I heard Misty say how she learned to shut up because, that's what society dictated for her to be a quote unquote normal person, right? And even Ashley was saying earlier about how she may not have done the poetry had she not been told over and over again that she was good at it. We are we are programmed really by society around us. And either we fit in or we don't. The thing is, in my opinion, it doesn't matter. And the more that we can tap into who we truly, authentically are, I think a better society we would have.
Yeah. What's your take on that, Misty?
Well, I think that, I'm sorry, Ashley or me?
Misty, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I agree with that, because you have these gifts, and everybody does, like you were saying, even a law enforcement, you hear of, I had a gut feeling, or mother's intuition, or however that you want to call it, or I could sense something. But, it's just what you do with it. And like you said, being creative, and what you put into something is what you're going to get back. And so, meditation, being around like-minded people, research, all that are great to have. I do like your story, Ashley, about the oranges poem. That was cool. How you took the apples and then did the oranges. But, it's law enforcement, unfortunately, they're not as quick to come around with using a psychic medium on cases, and in some instances I do kind of agree with them, because you should be vetted. You shouldn't just have somebody just to walk out from the outside to come in and almost solve cases, and so you should, your reputation is everything, and you should be vetted. But people are so much more accepting of psychic mediums in the paranormal world than what they were even 10 years ago. If you think about it, it's getting more mainstream. It's getting more accepting. So, for those of us, I think that is our responsibility to be an example of how to be, how to conduct yourself when you're helping others, and everything getting for monetary gain, which is, having money, of course, is nice, but the satisfaction that you get from helping others, and especially with something that you're blessed with, I mean, that's, immeasurable.
Yeah. What's your take on that, Ashley, and everything, just in terms of the creativity and whether we actually tap into our gifts as much as we should?
I think that we absolutely do not access our creative or spiritual gifts nearly as much as we should. And some of that, I think, is the fault of our education system. I've been a teacher for almost 15 years, and we we train kids to think in silos. Like, this is what happens in science, this is what happens in math, this is what happens in your art class, and your art class isn't that important, so we can take it away 3 times a week so you can do extra history or extra math. And so the idea of like, what does it mean to think creatively as a scientist, or what does it mean to bring artistry into my history lessons, and how all of those things inform one another and work together, I think is lost in a world where everything is a specific discipline, and we're taught that some disciplines matter more than the others, and then things become so cookie cutter, and can this be answered on a multiple choice test, and so even that opportunity to answer questions outside the box is gone from you when it's like, here's the question, here are 4 answers to choose from. I don't think kids get the opportunity to explore their own infiniteness. And so, by the time they're adults, it's like they've been out of practice. They haven't done it for so long. They've been made, fun of, or been made to feel ashamed, or been, punished for trying to give into creativity in many different instances. And so it's like, by the time you're out of school, it's like, all I know how to do is be a cog in the machine. Unless someone points to you and says you are an artist, then you also like, okay, what does it mean? Like, I'm a poet. Does that mean that I can't do painting? Does that mean that I can't, write poems about scientific topics? So it's like, even if you're allowed to express yourself creatively, you're still taught to do so within a box. And so all of like being a creative is like learning how to fight against the box you've been put into.
Hey, Doris, along those same lines, because you're a life coach, and I do agree kind of what Ashley is saying, because I know that even one of the companies I work for, not the HS Center, but another one, is one of those testing companies, one of the leading testing companies in the country. And while I work for them, I do get frustrated because sometimes we are teaching those kids into a box. And there was a moment, I don't know if even Ashley knows this, but I was a part of a kind of a creative audio group that came out of Clubhouse, and everything that IPC was a haiku poet created called the Funky Eye Puppets. And that's one of the things that he tried to get us to do, was get out of this notion of not having that childlike wonder, because a lot of people were professionals like myself and others, but we had been kind of gone into that corporate world or other worlds and weren't not necessarily all creative. Some of the people were actors and actresses, but there were others, and I've done some other voiceover work, but there were others that did not have that background. I remember one woman was a real estate agent, so it was sometimes trying to get us out of our own head and everything. So I just wanted your take on that, because I kind of agree with what Ashley says, that too often we're kind of training the kids out of being creative, and we want them to fit into the box, and we want them to kind of go that whole notion of whatever the common core is and everything along those lines. But I just wondered your take on that as a mother and as also a life coach as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I work on the most with my clients, is the deprogramming. It's the learning to trust yourself, learning to be creative, learning to find the thing that you enjoy, because for so long we get set on a path, and then we stay on that path, and we don't diverge from that path ever. That path becomes so worn and has worked for potentially decades, and then all of a sudden it's become so worn that your vehicle bottoms out, right? And you can't go on that path anymore. You need to find a new path. You need to forge a new way. And we don't know how to do that, because we've been told in our childhood exactly what Ashley said. This is when you do math, and this is how it's done. This is when you do science, and this is how it's done. Don't think any other way. Even in English, oftentimes when you're interpreting stories, you need to interpret it the way the teacher did. Otherwise, you get the question wrong. So you can't even analyze it yourself, right? So I definitely see that in my children and in my clients as adults.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This is actually, Misty, you kind of brought it up, but it is something that comes up on this show and other shows as well. But I'll direct this first to Ashley, but I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts about this. there's this notion that we all want to be creative and we all want to get our just dues and everything, but there you sometimes have to work those second jobs that I alluded to earlier, whether that's DoorDash or whether that's Grubhub, and a lot of times a lot of the folks that are out there wanting your talents don't necessarily want to pay you what you are worth as well. So I just wondering, how do you deal with that? Because I know that in your world, actually, and I'm sure in everybody's world, even in the life coaching world, that sometimes people don't understand the worth of what you have and they want to undercut you and not pay you necessarily what you are worth and all along those lines. So I know it's an issue within the spoken word community, but also the life coaching community as well. So how do you deal with that, Ashley? Because I know that sometimes people are, want you to do it for free. And I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for free performances, but it can't be every time.
Well, in my day job, I'm a teacher, so I'm just used to being undervalued and underpaid in general. But more seriously, I think for me, I have in mind, a set price like anyone else would have. And how I came to that is a long and storied journey that we don't have time for. And what I have found is that I had to say no to a lot of things for a while, and that was uncomfortable because I had been so used to taking the lowball offer, being grateful to have been asked, grateful to be invited, and I'm still grateful to have been asked, still grateful to be invited. But if you can't afford me, you can't afford me. And I have to be okay with saying no to that gig. And I found that the more I did that and the more comfortable I became with being I'm just not, you can't afford me, and that's fine. Then I'm just not for you. Then I have found that those places that do see my worth and do see my value started finding me because I was saying no to the ones that did not. And what I also found is that by my saying no to some of those lowball offers, the other writers in my community were also able to raise their own prices because it's okay, if you can find somebody that'll do it for $50, then you'll find somebody that can do it for $50. But if we as a community have decided no, that's not what our value is, then other people have to step up and give you what you're worth. The other side of that is that there are causes that are near and dear to my heart where there is wiggle room and space to have a conversation. Maybe I can't do an hour-long set, but maybe I can come do a couple poems. Maybe I can come, just spend time in the community with people. You know what I'm saying? And so there's, for those things that I care deeply about, those causes that invite me, there's sometimes wiggle room for a conversation. But also, if the attitude of that organization is, oh, you should be happy to be here, then also it's oh, this is not the energy that I want to give myself to either. So that has taken many years to get to that space. But we're here now and glad to be here.
Well, you mentioned an interesting word, and Misty, maybe you got some thoughts around that as well, because I know they don't care what the job is, even in the paranormal world and everything, that no is a very simple word, but sometimes it's hard to say no and everything. So I was wondering, how do you deal with that? Because I'm sure there are even cases that you don't want to take because you don't feel that they are right for you and that you probably don't want to deal with it. And I know that even though it's a simple word, it's yes, it's a simple word. Sometimes we are resistant of saying it because we're afraid of what impact we'll have with the people or afraid of losing some later opportunity or all along those lines. So how do you deal with that very simple word of no? Because I do think that sometimes people are afraid to say it even though it is a necessity.
Yeah, I had a problem with that for a while, saying no or trying to, this is the price for, different services or whatever. But I think it took me a while, but I did come to the realization that is how you're treated. You teach people how you want to be treated. And, I've learned to just keep it professional because you don't have friends or friends of friends or friends of friends of friends that, so-and-so, recommended you, whatever. And, sometimes people like with freebies or something. But you have to know your worth and you have to stand by that. And sometimes it's not easy to do so, and it's not that you think you're better than everybody else or whatever, but it is you. You know, we're all trying to, like you said, I work a day job, and I do my paranormal stuff, I guess, on the side or whatever you call it. But it's important that you also have respect. I mean, you respect others, but you also have to expect respect in return. And to me, just kind of being firm, or just kind of, this is the price, and just leave it in their court, you know, and then sometimes they'll get back with you and sometimes they don't. But there's a reason for everything, and just staying true to yourself and standing firm on what you have came to decision that helps you not be, well, let me give this to someone, are there instances? Sure, but every time, no. And so that's just what I had to learn personally was, stay true to myself and stay firm and what the decision was.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Doris, along those same lines, I kind of said I was going to get to this for all three of you and everything. One of the things that I am notoriously bad at, both in terms of the job market as well as the social life, because I'm in the early 60s and still in that single space, is I can be my worst inner critic. And I will tell that to anybody that wants to listen and everything, because I will sometimes talk myself out of opportunities. I know I've talked myself out of dating opportunities. I've definitely talked myself out of job opportunities, including some at some of the cultural arts institutions that I have worked at, because I was too busy having that inner conversation. And by the time I finally got a yes to myself and everything, the job or the lady had already moved on and everything. So I just wondered, what is your advice to those that are having those constant battles with the inner critic? Because I know I've been doing that for decades now, and it can be a nuisance, but it is one that goes on in the head on a regular basis. So how do you deal with that inner critic? Because I mean, the outer critics are bad enough, but the inner critic can be even much worse than those outer ones and everything.
Absolutely. And I want to give you credit, though, that you recognize that. That is, of course, the first step is recognizing that you have that inner critic. And the next step is to decide whether what that inner critic is saying is true or not. Because most of the time, it's not true, right? But that's the difference between intuition and inner critic, right? And so it's learning that, okay, is this a red flag that this person really isn't for me? Or is this me just being scared to put myself out there? Or whatever that inner critic is actually telling you. Of course, it's there to protect you. The unfortunate piece is that your brain is used to a certain way of doing things. And whenever you want to do something different, it's going to fight back. And that's that inner critic. So taming the inner critic is asking those questions, is recognizing it there. And sometimes it's just making yourself uncomfortable as long as you're still in a safe space.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your take on that, actually? Because I've seen some people, it's not just me, I've seen definitely some of your fellow poets that have battled that inner critic when they have decided to get on stage. I've seen some folks that I have seen do some tremendous growth. I can't think of it's a white poet that's very well known and everything, but she definitely had serious inner critic when she first came out there and all along those lines. But she has blossomed big time, and I don't even think she's in the area anymore, and her name is slipping me right now and everything. But definitely I've seen some of the poets that are very much caught up in that inner critic, and like I said, I have seen some that have gotten past it and all along those lines. But I just wondering, was there a time that you even had that inner critic? Because I don't know that you started off as a spoken word poet, because I think that you were getting into that later in life and everything along those lines. So how have you dealt with that inner critic?
So what has been important and extremely helpful for me is surrounding myself with people who can see my worth even when I can't see my own. So, there are times where I'll write a poem, or I'll, be thinking about slamming or thinking about performing, where I'm just like in my head and, oh, this isn't good, and so on and so forth. But Dasan will put me on stage anyway, or, Wendy will put me on stage anyway. Dasan knows if he asks me to go teach a workshop, go feature at some place, he knows that I don't say no to him, because I trust that he knows what I can do. So if he's giving me the opportunity, then I'm capable of meeting those expectations, even if I don't think that I am. Like I trust his intuition in that space, if that makes any sense. What has also been helpful for me is this is just recently. One of my coworkers asked me, she was like, well, what would you do if you chose to do the brave thing? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And she was asking in a very specific context. But like since then, like I'll even go to a restaurant that I've been to a million times, and go to get the thing that I'm usually getting, be like, what would I get if I was doing the brave thing today, and try something new, or what would I do if I was doing the brave thing, and then I fill out the contest application, because it doesn't matter that I'm criticizing myself in that moment. What matters is, oh, I'm doing the brave thing, so I might not be qualified, but okay, we're choosing bravery today, and that's been really helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. How have you dealt with the inner critic, Missy? I'm sure it's gotten in your life as well, where you've had those moments where you've had that inner critic. So how have you dealt with it?
Well, with a profession where accuracy is and perception is everything, you can't be totally wrong when you're reading someone and getting the messages. And so, what I learned is when I first started, doing readings, and, I would say something, like a name, and some, they'd kind of look at you and go, no, I don't know anyone by that name. But I knew that they would know. And so I always would say, well, you know what, just put it on a shelf and get back with me, And so like yesterday I was talking to someone, and I read her, over a year ago. And she goes, hey, by the way, I figured out whatever name that was that I had told her, she figured out who that I was talking to. Because you have to think, well, you don't know who that they're wanting to call forward. They're nervous sometimes about being in a reading. So everybody's, like their mind isn't totally focused on everything. But, so it's easy, you could get caught up in I can't believe I said, was that right? Did I hear right? Did I get the right message? It's easy to fall in that. But like I said before, you have to be true to yourself. You have to research. You have to do your homework as far as being the best medium that you can be, whatever profession that you're in. And, the message, you're the messenger, I'm the messenger. And so I just say the message isn't wrong. And it's up to the person to put that, where it needs to go, even if it needs to be on the shelf for a little.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just along those same lines and everything, and this is for everybody, because the Haiti Heritage Center is a cultural arts center, but it's also one that's got a lot of ties to past folks and everything. Papa Chuck is actually a major dancer, and there is a mural for him because he is still honored, even though he passed away some 6 years ago, and all along those lines. And there are other people that are honored in the building as well. So I was just wondering, I'll start with you, Doris. How important do you think it is to have a connection to those that are from your past and everything? Some people would call those the ancestors and everything, but how important do you think it is to have that connection just in general? And is it something that you even deal with yourself? And then I'd love to hear from Ashley, and it definitely sounds like Misty does, but how important is it to have that ancestral connection?
I think it depends. Like anything, I think it really depends on what that ancestral connection is. I think it's important to be informed about your ancestral connection, but how deeply you connect with those people really depends on how it serves you in life. Knowing where you come from is different than identifying completely with those people, and how you choose to run your life in the way that it is right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you? Because I've even heard some of your poems that have definitely talked about your past, talked about even people that have been in your life in the past and everything. So how important is it to have that connection to your family line and everything, even in your own creativity, Ashley?
Yeah, I think that it is super important to know where you come from, um, and know the people that you come from in a just in a practical way, because so many things. I write a lot about mental health in particular, and so many things are genetic and related to family patterns. And so, to look back and be like, oh, what we thought was quirky might have been a touch of the tism, or what we thought was just being passionate could have been some severe anger issues, and and being able to mine that family history, I think, gives us a better knowing of ourselves. Whether or not that gets into connection with ancestors is a completely different thing for me. um, and but I do honor and respect, like, just the need to know where you come from. I think that's super important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's your take on that? Was the connection to ancestors? You kind of alluded to it earlier.
Well, it's very important to have that connection, and because the gift of being a psychic or a psychic medium, is passed down through the lineage, and they're around, and they want you to have still communicate with them, still talk to them, and so to have that and to have them, and to know that they're present and that they are on your side. To me, that's everything. So to there's certain days that you honor. You know, why make it on certain days? Honor your ancestors as much as you can, because they say you die twice. When you die, and then when your name is spoken the last time. And so to keep that alive, always remember, honor your ancestors, pass down what you know about them, and it's just so important, especially in what I do, to always to do that and keep them in mind.
Yeah. Is there anybody actually that is your mentor? I mean, you mentioned Hassan, but is there anybody else that is a mentor, maybe even a mentor from the past? Because I know that one of the ancestors I have that I still, my both of my parents are living, so they kind of mold me as a person and still mold me to this day. But my grandmother, who has been gone since the 80s, definitely got me interested in creativity, and it is a passion that I've had. And she's been gone like more than 40 years because she passed in the early 80s and everything. But I do know that she created that first black library in Raleigh, so I am somewhat following in her footsteps and all along those lines. So I just wondered if there are any mentors that you have of your own, whether they're existing current mentors or mentors from the past.
Yes, definitely. I think about the name that immediately came into my mind was Tavis, who taught who taught me a lot about what it means to use poetry and spoken word as a tool to facilitate healing in people, particularly people who come from a faith tradition, specifically the Christian faith tradition, who have either walked away from it or who have been deeply hurt by it, and what it means to meet those needs using our art and our experience. He has been and continues to be extremely influential in that regard, even though he's passed away.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about yourself, Doris? Is there anybody that kind of you honor and was your mentor in the life coaching space and everything?
Oh goodness, there are so many, really. There are mentors everywhere in the life coaching space, and ancestrally, I would say that I stand on the shoulders of giants. I couldn't be where I am now if it weren't for the people who came before me, both in the life coaching space that have been teaching me different things, and of course, like I said earlier, I'm big on cycles and systems, and so what more than not that many generations ago, they were living cyclically because they didn't have any of the other options. They didn't, have the internet. I think I'm the first generation in my family who actually was born with electricity running in the household, right? So, I mean, these are we all stand on the shoulders of giants, but I don't know that I could actually narrow it down to just one person that was a mentor.
It makes a lot of sense. Everything. Is there a mentor that you have in the paranormal space, Misty, and everything?
Yes, actually there is, and it was last year when I kind of came to the realization of who one of the people that were around me, and I was at an event, and it was to honor your great grandmother, which a lot of us, we don't always think of our great grandmother. Some people don't even know their great grandmother's name. I barely remember, mine. And it was like a ceremony to give honor, and then you wrote your great grandmother's name on this piece of paper, and then you tied it to this tree. But it was really moving because, I hadn't thought of my great grandmother in years. And it made me, like recall stories that my grandmother would tell me about her, and how that, she was gifted and different things that she would say or do or dream. And it just kind of awakened that, oh, wow, then that's where I get it, because I didn't realize, exactly what was going on. But now, I talk to her. I remember her, things that we did together when I was little more. And it was just, I just thought it was so beautiful to honor someone and to have that, that recollection come back to me. And now I consider her like one of my spirit guides.
I think a lot of you had spirit guides, and definitely that's something we talk about at the Cultural Arts Center, because it is a definitely spiritually oriented building and everything. Ashley, one of the questions I was curious about, and I was going to ask you, is do you think that there is a way that we can get more young people, because you kind of alluded to it earlier, back into a spiritual journey? Because I have seen a lot of people that are walked away for whatever reasons from the church, because I actually personally consider myself more spiritual than religious and everything. But I did see kind of a push during the pandemic more into the metaphysical. A lot of people were getting into yoga and stuff like that during that time. But I just wondered, do you think that there are ways that you can draw people back into the faith walk, if that's a walk they want to go into, whether that's a Christian walk or Islamic walk or another walk as well?
So I can only speak to what I think is necessary to draw folks back to Jesus, which is leaning more into mystery. I think that one of the things that has driven people away from church in particular has been like, all your life you're told this is what this is, but you see examples from your lived experience where it's like, no, it's actually not that. But then you are shamed or reprimanded or whatever for bringing those questions to the forefront. And I think, like, just personally, one of the things that drew me back to faith when I walked away was having a minister that was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, that really sucks. And the Bible does say this, and I don't know. And just someone being willing to like admit that God is bigger than we have space for, I think would draw people back to faith. And I think there are ways that organized Christianity has rejected some of the more mystic and metaphysical aspects that were always inherent in Judaism and inherent in first century Christianity. And it's like, you're telling me not to do this, this, and this, but Peter did it, and so did Paul. So like, what do you mean I can't? And so just that honesty and that openness and that willingness to be open to mystery, I think would draw folks back to faith.
What's your take on that, Doris? Because that is something that I kind of agree with on, Ashley, that sometimes there are folks that want kind of their way or their highway kind of attitude, and they don't want to admit that they don't know it all. And the last time I checked, unless you are God himself, I don't know that anybody knows it all and all along those lines. But you got a lot of folks that are in politics and religion and other circles that you would think that they have all the answers. And I don't know that any of us have all of the answers and everything. But I just wanted your take as a life coach, because I do think that is a error that many people make in a lot of power circles and everything.
Yeah, I agree, and I applaud anyone who follows their faith, as well as people who decide not to follow a specific faith. I myself am intrigued about a lot of different faiths, and I find a lot of times we're saying the same thing in different ways. And so, I mean, the mystics might be saying that you'll get karma, whereas in Christianity, we'll say that you reap what you sow, right? But really, in the end, we're saying a lot of the same things. And so bringing the unity of that back, I think, would be phenomenal. And I love the community aspect, and that it is bigger, and no one does know all the answers at any point in time. And it is sometimes scary out there because, as you said, you know, if you don't agree with me, then will I shut the door on you? And I think it's time to open up and start listening to each other and really hearing what we have to say, because I think it's a lot more similar than different.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because one of the things my dad, actually, this was decades ago, had me come in. I think it was me and my younger brother. He actually had us come and watch a couple of TV shows. One was he had us come watch Shrek. Ironically, he wanted us to watch Shrek to see the subtle messages that are in Shrek, because there are some adult messages in both of the Shreks and everything, even though there are some, definitely it's a kid's movie, but there are some adult themes that are thrown in there. And if you're pay attention, you'll see those themes that are in there and all along those lines. But the other times that he had us come was it was either Ted Koppel or Peter Jennings. It was one of those famous anchors and everything. And it was, to your point, Doris, they looked at all religions and they found that most of the religions had a lot more in similarity than they had in difference and everything. And they had like some commonalities of love your neighbor, love your family, in terms of loving your kids, and the kids loving the parents, and loving Mother Nature, and a number of other things that were similar in base and everything. And that was both Eastern and Western religions, because I think they were studying all of them, and they were finding that there was more commonality that was existing, even though there are extremes on all religions as well. Like there are extreme positions, whether you're Islamic or whether you're Christian or Jewish or whatever. But in the middle, in the common group, most of the things are very much similar. At least that's the gist of what I recall. And like I said, that was decades ago, and I'd have to find that piece, because I'm sure it's out there in the world and everything. But it would be interesting if I can find that. You brought up something, and I'd love to hear, because I definitely want to hear one of Ashley, or Billy as I know her, and everything's pieces and everything, all along those lines. But something else that I've heard a lot of people talking about, and we kind of talked about it in this conversation, is, do you think that we're doing enough to preserve things as well? Because one of the things, I actually went to the International Black Theater Festival this past weekend and everything, and I was having a conversation with a couple of people, and then I brought it back to the center, is that a lot of great things happen, great conversations happen. That's why I'm glad to do this show, because this will be documented. It'll be documented as long as they keep these videotapes and everything for a number of times, and people can go back and watch our dialogue and all of those lines. But there have been many things that have happened the last 30, 40 years that there is no record of, and unfortunately it's not kept and not preserved. So I'm on a big preservation kick lately and everything, because I don't think that we preserve enough of the amazing things that happen culturally and everything. So what is your take on that, Millie? And if you want to jump in, Doris, and definitely Misty as well, I'd love to hear you. But I do think that we don't preserve enough of our past history.
So I'm torn, because the easy response is no, we absolutely don't preserve enough, and we need to document more. And that could be the end of that sentence. At the same time, I think that we have started to devalue our intuitive knowing. Mm-hmm. And we think that something that is written down on paper is somehow more important than an unction that comes up in the spirit. And I'm just like, that makes me nervous. And another thing that makes me nervous is I think that there are moments where we get so caught up in having the picture, having the video, having the documentation, that we are not as present to the experience as we should be or could be. So yes, we need to document more, but there's a line. I think there's a balance to be struck, and it's hard to know where that balance is.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some of that balance now because, to your point, and I hear where you're going, there are some people that won't come to shows because they feel that they can see the show online and therefore they don't get the full experience, because it's different to see a performance live and in person. Then there are some people that, for whatever reason, in some cases, it's a legitimate reason. They have legitimate health concerns, so they can't be in the room. But there are others that use it as a crutch, for lack of a better term, and they just choose not to come because they don't want to spend the money and all in that space. So I can see both sides of what you're saying and everything, Ashley, but definitely it'd be interesting in other folks' thoughts. But what's your thoughts on that, Doris?
I agree that we're not preserving history nearly as much as we could, and we're only always hearing one side of the story, and usually it's the side of the victor, and that's what we've been listening to for such a long time. I don't think we're getting a whole picture, so that's why I think it would be wonderful for more documentation, more information, so that we can see the whole side of the story instead of just one thing, so that we can form our own opinions or allow our intuition, as Ashley was saying, to fill us up, that maybe what we read wasn't quite right, and you get that little knowing, and you're programmed to release that and not actually have the opportunity to fully express that or see it from a different point of view.
What's your take on that, Misty, in terms of preserving it enough? Because definitely a lot of what you are doing is in that space of history and everything, but are we doing enough to preserve the history in your mind?
I think sometimes that we are. Ashley made a good point about, we're so worried about documentation that we don't get to experience what's going on in the now, because we want to, constantly, I'm on camera, like, everything. And then when I leave somewhere, I'm like, well, did I really get to enjoy that? Because I'm so worried about, on camera and this, but it is important both ways. What is truth? Maybe what is truth for me isn't the truth for you, or is it just, like I said, perception? So we do our own research, we do our own documentation, but like I say, you have to be true to yourself. And if you have that background, the history, that's, used to, a lot of people would write the history in family Bibles, and I don't know when it would be the big Bible, and that's how that back in the day that they would know when this one was born or this happened or whatever, because they all put all the information in the family Bible. Well, what happens is that, unfortunately gets lost or burned or whatever. So it's important to pass word of mouth too, but then you think, well, that gets kind of messed up, because by the time that gets to the 10th person, they've done put their spin, and so it's good for an individual to study and to document for yourself, but don't forget to enjoy the moment while you're documenting.
Just really quickly, Misty, along those same lines, because I was just curious. We've been having this conversation and everything. We got to go back about another 30 minutes or so to go. But do you think that everybody has, I kind of alluded to it earlier with the brain power, everybody has psychic abilities, or is it a gift that only a select few have? Or do we all have psychic abilities in one form, fashion, or another?
I think that everybody is blessed with some form of it. For people who are religious, in the Bible it says the gifts of God are given without repentance, and one of the gifts is the gift of discernment, which I consider as being a part of, a psychic medium. And it's just, like I said, like what you put into it. In some people it's not as evident. Maybe it could be if they paid attention more. We all have signs around us. We all have spirits around us. Some people don't want to interact with others, with spirits, and some people don't believe because they're scared or they don't understand or they don't know. So, we all have it. Like I said, mother's intuition, the cop's gut feeling, or just, like you walk up to someone and you kind of get that feeling like, ooh, like I need my space from you. Or you meet somebody and you just have that instant connection. What is that? That is a part of knowing, the knowing.
you brought up an interesting thing, and actually, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this and everything. Because I've had some friends that are very much religious and everything. They talk about what Missy just talked about, which is the notion of discernment, and I do think that discernment is very real in the Christian world and all along those lines. But I also think that there are some people, not saying all people, but there are some people that it becomes more of a theatrical thing, and it is not true discernment and all in that space. So I just wanted your take on discernment, because I do think that there are authentic people with authentic discernment, just like I think there are people that literally can speak in tongues. And I also think there are people that do it more for theatrical reasons, for lack of a better term, and everything. But I just wondering your take on the authenticity of discernment.
I think that everyone has a measure of discernment, just like Misty was saying. You get that intuition, you get that gut feeling. You meet somebody who you've never met before, but you've met them before. And I think that that's present for everyone. I'm trying really, really hard these days not to be judgmental of other folks. And so when I see what might seem as theatrics, or somebody, putting something on, my tendency is to try to be more reflective about like my own thoughts in that moment. And okay, like everyone to a certain extent wants to feel seen, feel loved, feel known. And so whatever these theatrics are just another attempt at getting that thing that I also want. And so I try not to be judgmental in that space. I try to show empathy in that space. And also realize that they are trying to dig deeper into something that is present for all people. However I feel about the way that they're going about it, notwithstanding in the moment.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a good way to handle it, and definitely more people should do that. But just along that line of what you just said, a friend that I've known for years, who actually served on a board for a minute, he had one of those kind of moments that you're talking about, where things happen and they happen for a reason, because he's about to be married for his third time. And ironically, they met using social media. We've been talking a little bit about social media and mental health and everything. They met through social media. I don't know whether it was eHarmony or Tinder or which one of them it was. And the ironic thing is that they actually went to the same church in the same town. So they actually are from Durham and everything, but it took that social media moment for them to meet, because when they got together, and now he has proposed to her, I think they're getting married later on this year and everything. It's like, wait a minute, you go to what church? I go to that church as well and everything. You serve on the usher board, so do I, because I think that he does the 8 o'clock service, she does the 10 o'clock service. But it took something outside in order for it to happen and everything, versus them meeting in the church that they attend at the same time and everything was at a different time. They took that outside force of social media for them to actually connect. And like I said, they seem like they are going for what should be the third and final marriage for him. I'm not sure what it is for her in terms of the number and everything, but it's just interesting how that can happen, that you would think that they would have already met, but it took an outside force for them to actually get pushed together. So you're a life coach. What is your take on that, Doris? Because when I first heard about this about a week ago, or less than a week ago, I'm going like, wow, that's a trip that y'all had to meet that way when y'all are in the same space on a regular basis for years.
I have to say that things happen in their own divine timing, really, because I had a similar experience. My husband and I found out much later that he used to come to where I used to work as a late teens while I was going to college, this sandwich shop, and he would go there for lunch. He worked next door, and he would go there for lunch, and I never paid attention to him. He never paid attention to me. We were both in other relationships at the time, had no clue, never really even knew each other. We even had mutual friends. And many years later, after both of our relationships had dissolved, these friends set us up on a blind date, and as we got to know each other, we realized that we had met. He used to go there almost every day for lunch. He was probably one of my regulars when I was working, and we had no clue. And now we've been married for 20 years. So who knows?
Who knows when it'll happen or how it happened. Do you think, Ashley, that we pay enough attention? Because you kind of alluded to it. I know your poems deal with it. And I definitely want to hear one of them before we get out of here. Did we pay enough attention to mental health? Because I know that that's been something I've been hearing a lot, both on this network and on the news in general. So I think that it definitely became a big issue around the time of the pandemic. But I also think that sometimes it's swept underneath the rug, even by some of our school systems. And my brother actually works with at-risk youth, and I have friends that have been guidance counselors and things along those lines. But I wonder, do we do a good enough job of paying attention to the mental health, and particularly the mental health of our young?
I don't think that we do. I think that we are in an interesting position now where it's becoming less stigmatized to talk about mental health concerns. And so I do think that as it's becoming destigmatized, that we do need to have more conversations around mental health. I also get nervous because for two reasons. One, I think that by destigmatizing mental health, one of the things we are also doing is making it easier for us to not have to change a system that might be causing anxiety or causing depression. Or it's like, is this kid really anxious, or is this kid being made to do, because of the school system, things that are just not natural for a kid this age to have to do? And I don't think we have that conversation enough either. And I think that there are ways in which we talk about the easy mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and I don't mean easy as in easy, but like what we're not doing is having conversations about schizoaffective disorder or bipolar disorder, or some of the more intense mental health crises that are also showing up in young people. So yes, we're talking about it more, but there's still so much more work to be done, I think.
Yeah, but along those same lines, how much does social media, and I guess I'll start with you, actually, but definitely want to hear from Doris and Misty as well, playing into that? Because I am glad sometimes when I find out things on social media, but it can also be very alarming when you find out things on social media. I can tell you that while I have my own thoughts around gun and gun control and everything along those lines, it can be a little disruptive. And it happened this weekend and everything, when you go to a major event like I did this weekend, and then I come back home and I check my Facebook page, and that's when I find out that somebody that I had known as a pioneer in sound was killed in a shooting / suicide, and all along those lines, because that incident that took place over there in Lebanon over the weekend and everything. But Greg Lee, same last name but no relation, was a person that was known as a sound person, very easygoing, and from what I've heard, he was trying to actually break up a fight, but he wound up losing his life. And then also the person that shot him then took their own life and everything. But it kind of, I'd be lying if I said that it didn't kind of disrupt my day, which had been a very positive day when I got home and see that on social media where folks are shaking their head and reporting what happened. And I'm glad that I've learned about it, but I wish I maybe had learned about it in a less startling way and everything. So I just wanted our take on how much social media can sometimes be a good tool, but can also be a startling tool as well.
Yeah, no human being is made to know as much as social media allows us to know.
Right.
To be continuously connected to a 24-hour news cycle is incredibly damaging for adults. So for a kid to have access to that same news cycle where it's all bad news because that's what gets the clicks, when they don't have a filter developed that lets me know this is true, this is false, I don't think we understand now. I think we have yet to fully understand how much damage we're doing to kids by allowing them to have access to all of the information they have access to via social media. And yeah, there are good things about it. There are great things about it, but I just, in my mind, not great enough for a 13-year-old to have access to a 24-hour news cycle. Like, I think we're doing irreparable harm to a lot of our kids.
I agree with you on that. What's your take, Doris? You've got kids of your own. I think they're grown kids, if I heard you correctly, by now and everything, but you raised them when they were teenagers and everything. But what is your take on social media and its impact to what Ashley was saying?
I agree completely. it's become like a thing. And these kids, if you're lucky if they're 13 when they start using social media, because I've seen children much younger and that they say, oh, don't worry, I can just put in a different age, it'll work, and they're bypassing things because they're smart. And there are a lot of wonderful things about technology, but as Ashley said, there are some pretty scary things, and no human is meant to know all that we do know. I mean, I am grateful that I can do research with Google and things like that a lot easier, but the social media and all of the notifications, I'm torn between, there have been a lot more ADHD diagnosis lately, and I don't know if it's just because it's more acceptable, so more people are getting tested, or is it the fact that we're being bombarded all the time that we don't know any different, and that our attention span has just gotten that low and we can't function that way? And I'm not really sure what the answer to that is.
Yeah, along those things, like actually, it does seem that sometimes it is. I don't want to say the cool thing, but I do know that there are a number of people that are out there that have these issues, including various forms of neurodivergency. Like I understand Simone Biles has some things in that space, as do others. But I do sometimes wonder if there are some kids that it has become the cool thing for them to be seen in that way and everything all along those lines. And maybe they aren't as bad as they are perceived to be. Because one of the issues I used to have with Ritalin, I actually had a ex that I was dating. This was probably 2 decades ago, and everything, and that was when the early stages of Ritalin. And as far as I was concerned, that kid, when he was a teenager, and he's now in his 30s, was just hyperactive. He did not need to be on Ritalin. So I do sometimes wonder if we don't misdiagnose things, and if people don't misdiagnose themselves and everything. So I just wondered, you as a teacher, if you see that, or am I reading too much into things?
So this is my favorite rabbit hole to go down because I teach at a school for kids with learning differences, and I think that there is a huge sort of uptick in people misdiagnosing themselves with ADHD because of the way that ADHD is perceived versus what it actually is, and obviously people can have it to differing levels of severity, but like ADHD is really debilitating, that inability to regulate your dopamine. And I think Doris, it does go to what you said. I think that there is some genuine neurodivergence, but then there is also like how can your dopamine be regulated when you get a notification on your phone every 5 seconds, which gives you a hit of dopamine? So it's like, if your body is getting that every 5 seconds, then there's no need to learn how to regulate it. So when you go to put your phone away, it's like, oh, I don't know how to be still because I've never had to do it, for more than a minute at a time. What the solution to that is, who knows? But I think there is partially the destigmatization of it, so more people are being tested. But also the system that we live in makes it such that that type of neurodivergence is masked by the technology that we have access to.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And then the other thing that happens sometimes is that I know sometimes with the neurodivergent population, there's this notion of space and them not giving space and all along those lines. And sometimes there are people that don't understand the space conversation, but then there are others that I think that it becomes almost like a power play and all along those lines. So I do think that there are sometimes people that are using it to their advantage, even though they have a better understanding that maybe they are giving off and everything. And maybe I'm misreading some folks, but I do think that there are folks that are using it in their own kind of manipulation way as well, even though there are folks that are legitimately that way. But am I reading wrong that there might be some folks that are manipulating, using those things that they know about signals in a negative way, in the kind of manipulation kind of mindset?
Yeah, there's always going to be bad actors that show up regardless of the conversation that's being had. With neurodivergence, ADHD in particular, I think that it's too hard to pretend to have it. I think that a kid that rewind. What I also think is true is that there are some things that show up culturally that are called ADHD that aren't actually that. It's just like this is how my family shows up. This is how we exist in spaces. What do you mean I have to be quiet and listen to you talk? When I listen to my preacher who's saying things that are more important than you're saying, I say amen. I call and respond. I talk back. But now I have to be quiet for 45 minutes? Can't be. So I think that there's a lot more that has to be had, a lot more that needs to be brought to the table when we have conversations about neurodivergence.
I definitely agree with you on that and everything. Before I get to the closing and all of this, this has been a great conversation. Everything. I definitely want to hear more about some of the cases that Missy's been working on. But before I get to that, I definitely, and then we'll get wrap up in 10, 15 minutes. But I cannot have you leave Millie, without having a poem. So we got to have at least one of your poems on mental health. So do you have anything to add? If you don't, then I'll understand. But I know you got a lot of things that are known off the top of your head.
Wow. Okay. Because I knew you were going to do this, I have a book with me. Did you want me to go now, or did you want to talk to me?
Yeah, you go now.
Okay. This poem is called "The Book of the Generations of This Depression," and it is from my book Genesis, and it goes like this. In the beginning was Helen, who was sometimes Cynthia and sometimes Grace, and Helen begat my father, and Cynthia begat his quick temper, and Grace begat his smooth tongue, and his tongue begat him a line of women that wrapped around the block begat his drive to leave the city begat the grief he carried with him. This is the grief that drug him to the bottom of the bottle, and rock bottom begat the girl who believed that she could change him, and change begat the beginning of their new life together, which begat Kentucky, begat Würzburg, begat Arizona, begat Virginia, which begat a small town to settle down in that felt like dust tracks on a road. And once the dust settled, Cynthia reared back up in the bloodline, begat anger, begat secrets, begat the death knell tolling in the family photos, and the girl who believed in change once begat a ghost still in search of her bones.
All right. Powerful as always. You always got powerful poems and all along those lines. And that folks can actually, I don't know whether the next poetry slam will be on the 17th and all along those lines. I think that's the paper thin one where you can read from paper and everything. So
Yes.
they've got some amazing new things going on. So it's paper thin 2 and all along those lines. And then they have the one, which I think is a fascinating one called the lyric slam, where you literally can read lyrics from a poem and everything. Other than that, they've got the ones that are the more standard slams, where they pick from the audience, the judges. Who knows? Maybe Doris will come down from Canada, or maybe Misty will come from Louisiana, and they may wind up being judges in Durham at some point or another, and all along those lines. And
We'd love to have you.
want to spit their own poems and all in that space, so that might happen as well. But Misty, one of the things I am always admired about Louisiana, it is a very cultural town, and I can't remember if you're in New Orleans or all along those lines. So what is your own cultural journey, if there is any? Because I know there are a number of people that are in the Zydeco space there, as well as just other forms of blues, which is a form of music that I love dearly and everything. And of course, there are people that have gotten into the mystic realm within New Orleans as well. So I just wanted your take on your own creativity, and if there are any creative journeys that you have. I'd asked Doris that earlier, but I haven't got to ask you if there were any creative outlets that you have of your own.
Oh, yeah, New Orleans, I always say it's the melting pot. We represent everyone here and learn from everyone, culturally, spiritually. Can't go anywhere. We celebrate death here. We celebrate with the second line. We celebrate with parades, and like the second line in the street, music, drinking. It's all part of the culture here. And anywhere that you go, especially in the French Quarter, you're going to have spirits. Everybody's going to have a story to tell about, this is haunted, or I knew someone, or where you're standing right now, so and so, passed away. And so, it's just a wonderful place to be on this journey, and because it's so much, and it, creatively, it just revives you and makes you a better person, makes you a better at your craft and everything. The music, Everything here, it has a meaning. It has it all goes together. And so, and the heat ain't is terrible, but besides that, it's just a beautiful place, and I feel real honored to be here, on this journey in the city, this city of the dead. So, we got a lot going on.
Yep, definitely a lot going on there in New Orleans, and you would probably fit in. Even Ashley and Jason know this as well because I've worked at the center for a number of years, the HI Heritage Center, that nobody that works there has not run across some of what we're talking about, because definitely there have been it's an old building. It was built in the 1891 and everything along those lines, but the center is 50 years old. So definitely in 1869 was when it was a brush arbor, but the physical building is 1891, which means it's got a lot of history and all along those lines. And just about everybody that's worked there, including those that are part of the poetry community, has said that they hear things that they can't quite understand and all along those lines. I don't think that I was speaking out of school when I said that. I think even actually it was the most religious woman that I know, one of them, has even said that she said, go there, said there's some things going on in this building creaking that I'm not quite understanding because it is an old building. Am I correct in that, Ashley? Because I think you said that there have been times that you have heard things that you didn't quite know where they were coming from.
Here's the thing, but that's not my business. That's for whoever lives there to deal with on their own.
Exactly. We all deal with everything. No doubt about it. As one of the staff historians, I can tell you that it is definitely something that is talked about on a regular basis. Before I get to the last question, I get to for everybody on these kind of shows, and like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Is there a case, I mentioned the Peterson case, but is there a case that you wish that you had been involved in that you weren't involved in, Misty? And is there a case that you can tell us about that you were involved in that you are still thinking is one of your best cases, and all along those lines? Because we all have things that we wish we had done that we had not done. So is there a case that you wish you had been involved in that you have not had the pleasure of, but you've read about?
Well, I can wrap all that up into one case. I wish I had was on it when it first happened. I recently picked it up, and currently I did an episode on my podcast about it. It's the case of Joshua Woodruff. January the 1st, 2016, he was in the French Quarter, right after New Year's, like 3 o'clock in the morning. He was getting ready to cross the street, and when he took a couple of steps, he was hit by a car. Now that's pretty hard enough, as his family, I'm sure, to deal with that. But what haunts me personally is that he was drugged under the car for 8 miles. And it's just, that stays with me. It stays with me that 8 years later, the case hasn't been solved. They have security camera footage of the car. They have a composite drawing. They have witnesses, allegedly. And so why isn't this case solved? And I always say it's easy to blame law enforcement, for lots of things, and for lots of things they need to be blamed for. But it's important as the community that if we know something, say something. Some people, they don't want to be involved because either they don't care, they're scared, they don't know what to do, So this case, I kind of put myself into his parents' shoes, and I would hate to know that one of my children, was drugged across the bridge in New Orleans from the French Quarter until the body dislodged. And it's gruesome, and it's not a pleasant thing. But to me, it's an injustice because it isn't solved. And so, like I said, I recently, I think about a month ago, I went and we did an episode in the French Quarter, and I drove, on camera as close as I could to the route that was taken, because they picked him up on the driver on so many cameras. Anyway, I drove that route to show everybody just how long that would be to have someone under your car, and how only 2 people allegedly saw what happened on a busy night on Bourbon Street, New Year's Eve. And so I'm tackling this case hard because there is an answer out there. And like just cases like that. Now I'm going to be starting to work on with law enforcement. At this time I can't go into which cases that those are, but the Joshua Woodruff case. I think about his family. I pray for his family and friends. That one day that we'll be able to find out who did this to him and get justice.
That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting you said that because I ran into I went to the candlelight vigil for Sonia Massey on Monday. That's right, it was after work, so it was on a Monday and everything along those lines. And there was some folks that were saying just what you said, which is that there are folks, even in some of our cases here in Durham, that they know the perpetrators, but they are afraid to come out and speak against the perpetrators for fear of consequences. So this particular gentleman was urging people to kind of be brave and to kind of take the notion of handling justice and letting those perpetrators be caught and everything, particularly if they are known. But I know a lot of people are afraid and want to keep into their own business and not be seen as stool pigeons or seen as somebody that's a troublemaker. So I did see where he was going, which is this notion that if you are trying to have justice be served, that then you know who the perpetrators are, that you need to let folks know what that information was, because that was one of the things that the speaker said, and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Because I want to say it involves because we've had two cases recently where babies lost their lives. At least one. I think it might have been two, because it was a 2 and a 3-year-old, if I remember correctly. And what I can't remember is if both babies passed or just one passed and everything. But I do know there were two that were shot recently, like in the last month or so. So that's something that unfortunately is sad and going on in our society and all along those lines. But on a lighter note and everything, one of the things I was curious about, Doris, I'll start with you and everything as we wrap up the show, is there a message you haven't got to in terms of the way that we can even use astrology in our life coaching? And also one of the things I get to do with all my guests is a message of positivity. So this is a global network, Pod TV, is that Nick and Kim founded, and they have me helping with my own program as well as being the program director and everything. So there's a message of positivity that you would like to share, and also how you can be contacted if folks want to continue the conversation at a later time and all along those lines. And I do know that these interviews air several times for like a week or two as well and everything. So if you want to just share anything that you haven't got to, your message of positivity, and how you can be contacted, and then I'll go to Ashley and then close out with you, Misty, as well.
A message of positivity, as well as maybe a little bit of tough love at the same time, is you're on this ride. So either you can be in the passenger seat or you can be in the driver's seat, and you get to choose. So it's your choice to take control of some of that and what you want to do. Now, as far as creating structure in your life, I like to use the moon, but use whatever works for you. I love the different phases and things like that. So if that's something that you'd like to explore, or creating structure in another way for you, you can reach me at promptedcollective.com. All of my contact information is on the website. So, yeah.
Sounds great. Thoroughly enjoyed your insights as well. Ashley, what's your thoughts, a message of positivity, anything that you didn't get to that you want to share, and all along those lines, and definitely any, God could say, ways that you can be contacted as well?
Message of positivity. I want to say something more profound than be kind to yourself, but be kind to yourself. I think that we don't do enough to treat ourselves like people that we care about. So do more of that. I can be found, the easiest place is ashleylumpkin.com. I've got a new book coming out in October that I'm excited about. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. What's the title of that book, and where can they find that book and all along those lines?
The book is called The Sad Stays. It's a memoir about my mental health journey. And the pre-order link will be available on ashleylumpkin.com in the next week or so.
Okay, so folks can go there and get a copy of that book, which is a very powerful book, sharing your own mental health journey and all along those lines and everything. So definitely, before I get to Misty, I guess the only other question I have for you is, do you feel that you get enough support from the arts administrators of the world? Because I've been having that conversation as well. So just wondering, do you feel that you are getting enough support from the arts administrators of the world? And if not, what message would you give to them?
From the arts administrators as people, definitely yes. I think that community of folks is very loving and supportive. From arts administration and those processes, not necessarily, but that's part of a larger and ongoing conversation that I think is just now starting to be had in North Carolina in some real ways, and hopefully we'll see some changes going forward.
Yep, definitely can understand that and everything. Misty, if you want to say how you can be reached and any message of positivity that you have and anything else that you haven't covered that you wanted to cover, and then we're ready to go out of here. I'll actually go out with a contest from another network. I think it's on one of the YouTube channels that I think that definitely Ashley will enjoy, because it's called Babble or Bible, but it's something that Mario Steele does, which is a game show that will put out, and I think he's even done a couple of cruises. This notion of he'll give a quote and then you have to guess whether it's actually from the Bible or whether it's just total babble and all along those lines. But you'll see about it when I play the particular commercial, because I think he's been doing this now for 3 or 4 years, and I first learned about him through Coco McMillan, who has a show here on the network every Thursday and is a former background vocalist for Gerald Levert, and she's got some authors coming on her show tomorrow, because I've already got the link from her about that particular show, and she also owns a tea shop at the Cary train station and all along those lines. But definitely, Misty, any thoughts that you've got in terms of final words that you want to say and a message of positivity and how you can be contacted, even if a person has a case that they want to deal with you?
Sure. Positivity statement is to keep an open mind. You know, everybody's journey, your journey, and everybody else's journey. But when you do find what journey that you resonate with, embrace it. You know, do all that you can. Be focused and, share your gifts with other people. Don't make it about yourself. Share and do as much good as what you can. And respect your ancestors. But, it's good to respect the dead, but it's also just as important to respect the living.
That makes sense. And how can you be reached if folks want to get in touch with you?
Sure. So my YouTube channel, it'd be under Quest 504, and would love to have, to see some new subscribers on there too. So that would be cool.
Sounds good. And before I play these 2 PSAs and all along, including that one that I mentioned about Babble and Bible and everything, I forgot to ask you. I know Ashley has got books, but do you, Misty, and you, Doris, have books yet, or is that something that is on the wish list and everything? So is there? I know you've got the website, but do you have a book yet, Doris? And also, Misty, do you have a book yet? So I'll start with you, Doris. Do you have a book that's out as of yet?
I don't have an actual book out yet, no, but I'm all about prompts. So if you're looking for journaling prompts and things like that, check out my website, because there are different prompts available there.
Just out of curiosity, before I get to find out if Misty's got a commercial and get us all out of here, just give us an example of a prompt or two.
Let's say, for example, you're working on self-awareness. Maybe you might wonder, do you work better in the morning? Or what time of day do you work better? Or are you a good friend? Why or why not?
Yep, those sound like good things to prompt and everything along those lines. Misty, do you have a book as of yet, or are you working on any books about your current cases or past cases, or is that something in the works?
Oh, well, I do not have a book. I've been approached by several people, saying that I should write one. So I'm thinking that one day soon that it'll happen, and I'll let y'all know.
Please let us know. Ashley, for those that are thinking about writing a book, apparently Misty is, what advice would you give her if she's going to write this book? Because you've written a couple of books, and I know Jason and others have. So for those folks that are thinking about writing a book, whether it's Misty or others, what advice would you give them if they're thinking about writing a book?
Don't think about it, do it. Just jump in.
Yeah.
Yep. I like that advice. Good, solid advice. Well, on that note, we're going to check out the Mario Steel commercial. Like I said, this has been a fun conversation with you three ladies at this particular edition of the Online Dinner Party. And hopefully I'll get all three of you back on future editions as well. I know that I'll run across Ashley at the Slam not this Saturday, but next Saturday. Even though my alma mater has got a game or a group of us going to the Bulls game, so she might not see me as long as she sees me, because I'm usually there for the duration. So it might be an in and out kind of thing on the 17th at Big Earth Inn to this time around, but I'll definitely be there in full force in the September edition. But the August edition may be in and out at my alma mater. And yes, there are a few Marquette alumni even here in Durham, North Carolina. We're going to be going to watch that particular game on that same day as the next Slam and all along those lines. So you might not see me as much as you usually do in that particular case. You and Deshaun might have to get by without me being in the building.
Oh, mercy. Oh, mercy.
You will handle it. So right now, let's get on out of here.
It's time for Bible or Babble. Gather round for your new favorite show. If you hear the word, show 'em what you know. Let's go. Bible or Babble. It's Bible. Let's go. All in every saint, we gon' put you to the test. See who know that B.I.B. a little bitch. Bible or Babble. It's Bible. Let's go.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
It's non-stop, I won't fold.